you say and contribute by opening your mic will be recorded and it will not be edited out, and this video will be made available on the Turn On YouTube channel afterwards. All the resources for today you can find on Microsoft Learn, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Microsoft Learn in a moment. I have just popped that in the chat for you as link as well. So without any further delay, let's get started. So my name is Martin. I work as part of the team at Turn It On, delivering training sessions such as this and working with schools to help people use technology to benefit the pupils, the staff, the parents in the organizations that we work with. First of all, we are going to introduce you to Microsoft Learn, and Microsoft Learn is the place where today's training is based upon. It's also where you can find all the resources from today's session. If you've not been there previously, you can click the link that I've just dropped into the chat. It will open up a page in your web browser. What you'll need to do is sign in the top right hand corner. If you've already got an account, great. If you haven't, don't worry. You can use the Office 365 account that you've been given from your school or college. Once you're signed in, it allows you to study individual courses that might be of interest to you, or you can look at doing pathways of courses, and this builds up a history of your achievements, also gets you certain certifications and badges to prove using this for CPD that you've been investing that time in developing yourself or developing the others that work with you. Some of those pathways are formalized. So there is a Microsoft Educator pathway. That's for people that are just dipping their toe in and trying Office 365 for the first time, and we run sessions around those. There's also the sessions that we're going to do today, which is Microsoft Advanced Educator. That's taking a bit more an in-depth look at a platform, and today we're going to look at how to manage your files in the cloud. If you want to take things further and you've conquered Microsoft Educator and Microsoft Advanced Educator, you can apply to become a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. That will be somebody in school that's leading change. You might be a middle leader, you might be a subject lead, but you're using technology to enhance learning, you're using it to reduce workloads for others, and that you'll be bringing about some sort of change within the school or the institution you work in. Turn It On runs courses for all of those associated with Microsoft Learn. If you want to sign up for any of those, you can go to www.turniton.co.uk/events, and you can pick the ones that will be coming up in the future. At the end of today, we will give you a code, and that can be redeemed in Learn, and that will set you on your way for various courses and also experience points that you can get. Back to today. We're going to be focusing predominantly on OneDrive, and we'll look at how you can manage files in OneDrive, how you can get to it and then access those files, how you can edit them, and also how you can do things such as share files with others. We'll then compare that to using, for instance, files that might be stored in Teams or SharePoint and the differences between the two. And I'm happy to take any questions at any point during the training. Feel free to pop them in the chat. Also, you can ask questions by unmuting your mic if you want to. It's absolutely fine as to which way around you want to go, but you're more than welcome to also share your experiences of using this technology and how maybe it's helped you or how you're using it yourself. Just to bring this all into focus initially, people often say, well, that's great, Martin, but why on earth do I want to use the cloud? I haven't been using the cloud for the whole of my life. Why am I going to start doing it now? There are some really useful benefits to moving over and using the cloud being keeping your files in a section of Office 365 like OneDrive, and then they are stored on Microsoft servers. So it means that everyone can access their files from wherever they are. You could be in England, you could be in Australia, you could be in Japan. It doesn't matter. If you log in and you go to office.com, and to get to one version of OneDrive is www.office.com, which is the login for Office 365. And it also means that you can be more efficient on the way that you work with staff, either working together and collaborating on a single file or sharing more easily than you have done in the past, which may have traditionally been either moving things around on a server or emailing them to each other. It also reduces that administration of trying to do the merging files after they come back on an email, trying to work out who made which changes, or not being in a file at the same time because it doesn't save you work. All of that goes away with moving all your files into OneDrive and using the cloud. It also means you can easily search and find content. There's a pretty useful search tool in OneDrive. And it makes easier communication. You can add things like comments in there that can then get resolved in real time, or you can add to further comments, and you can get a dialogue going within a document. If you're absolutely new to this, don't worry. Let's just explain what these different sections of Office 365 are. So OneDrive is the area that might replace your private area on the server. It could be your H drive or your personal drive that nobody else can get to, or it could replace your My Documents on your computer. But whichever way you think of it, it's where you keep your files and folders that nobody else can get to unless you're going to invite them in. And that's one of the benefits. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. Think of it also like having to have that USB stick that you maybe used to carry around with all your planning in it in your precious files. Well, you don't need that anymore. It can simply go in your OneDrive. And it can't be accessed by anybody else because it's tied to your Office 365 account, your email address and your password. And the only way that anyone else can get in is if you physically open the door for them and invite them to come and join that file or that folder. The next area we'll look at is SharePoint. As the name suggests, SharePoint is the equivalent of your old whole school shared area that you might have had from the server, or you might have had a teacher shared area. But SharePoint by name is the place where you enter files or store files and folders that you want to use by others, or you want them to get access to. It is very much like that shared drive, but you also need to remember that your personal and your original copies would go in your OneDrive, and it might be a second copy that you're sharing that goes in your SharePoint and so forth. But remember that anyone can then get to it, access it, delete it, and modify it. So you wouldn't put your only copy of something you've spent hours or days working on in your SharePoint, just like you wouldn't put it in a shared area of the server. And then Teams has Teams files, and that works in exactly the way the SharePoint does, because it is just a SharePoint linked into Teams, although it's called Teams files. Any questions on the differences between those platforms there? Anybody want to know anything in the way that there is difference between the two? No. Okay. We'll look at you and your individual files. If you've never visited OneDrive before, the online version will look exactly like that. You'll have a lovely little robot that's welcoming you in. And then you'll have three areas on the left that you'll get really familiar with, and we'll break away from the presentation and show you those. So I've got some files in mine that have been created, and they are stored in the file section in the top left hand corner where I've got the red ring around. But also, if you want to get something you've edited really recently, you look in the recent section on the left, or if you want to get to something that somebody has shared with you, because you can share if you wish, it's in the shared list. And making new content is very simple. You've got a button to make new folders. You've also got a button to start new documents here at the same time. If you want to upload anything, you can drag and drop it in, or you can use the upload buttons. And then you will end up with your files coming into your OneDrive. So that's a good opportunity for us to break away from the presentation and swap over and go and look at a real version of this. As I've said, feel free to pop any questions you might have into that chat. I'll come back and look at those from time to time. But let's nip over and have a look at Office 365. So as I said, if you want to get into the online version, and we're going to focus mainly on the online version today, although you can have OneDrive on your computer, and I'll explain the differences between the two. You simply open up a web browser. I'm using the Edge browser from Microsoft. And you go to www.office.com, and that will then bring you into your login page for Office 365. You simply log in using your email address and your password that you would normally use to get to your email. And then, depending on the way that your Office 365 is set up, you're either going to end up on a page that will look a bit like this. You're going to end up in your Outlook emails. and that will be the online version. If you use the desktop software, you can use the online version. You don't have to use the desktop software, or you're going to end up here, which is the Office 365 landing page, which is where you see documents you've edited recently. And you also can get some apps that are frequently used down the side, or you can press the buttons on the top and you can get to them in the app launcher. So we're going to focus at the beginning on OneDrive. And when you click on OneDrive, it will take you into the landing page of OneDrive. As I said, if you've got a situation where you've never used your OneDrive before, then that will be blank with the little robot that we looked at in the presentation. If you've been using it in any way, you'll start to see your folders and your documents. Whether you're using the OneDrive on your computer or the OneDrive in the web browser, they will sync together as soon as you get an internet connection, and it will just detect any changes and then amend the files accordingly. We're going to start in the online version, but I will show you how the desktop version, the software installed on your Windows 10 or 11 laptop, might work with this as well. So as I said, I'm over here on the left at the moment in my file section, and this is some folders and some documents I've uploaded previously, the ones I use on a daily basis. I can upload those by using the upload button at the top, and I can either put files in individually, or I can put folders which might contain other folders or files, or I can go on my computer and I can bring up the normal Windows Explorer window where I see all my files and my folders, and I can drag a folder over and then let it go and it will upload. If I do drag a file over, let's pick something. I might drag a file in and release it. In the top corner, you'll see uploading one item. It'll tell you it's uploaded and do you want to share it? You don't have to share it. If you click away from that box that's just popped up, it will then show you the action plan template that I've just uploaded there. And it will tell me over here that these are private, with the exception of those two documents down there, which are shared. So you can see what other people might be able to access compared to what's private. Then you are in a situation where you might want to edit that document, or you might want to make something new. So you might want to make a new folder. If you want to make a new folder, you can go into the new and create a folder. You can also make new documents if you wish. If you've got something that you've just uploaded, you can open it from here and it will open up Word in the web browser. So you don't need to have Office installed. This is really useful for pupils and students you might be working with, because it means that they don't have to have Office at home in order to work with their folders in OneDrive. It will just load up from the web browser. If you I'll leave that loading. If you want to download it, you can also download it, or you can simply open it from here as well. If you decide you want to move something, let's close it down a minute, you can tick the box on the side, you can pick up your file. I might decide this is relating to my teaching, and I'll let it go, and then it will move from that top level into my teaching folder. If I click on my teaching folder, there's the action plan document that I've used before, and I've got my teaching resources building up there. If you want to start a new document, you could. So if I went into administration and maybe I am working in the office and I want to start a new file that I'd like everyone to work in, it's going to be a Word document. And what I want to do is design a new template letter layout. So this is going to be a template school letter. And then we can click down. Now, I don't need to worry about where it's saving, because I've opened this while I'm in my OneDrive. It'll automatically save in the folder I was last in my OneDrive. If I want to rename it, I don't have to come out the file. I can click the name on the header there, and I can just call this letter template. And whatever changes I'm making are instantly saving, so I don't have to go over and go file, save as, or anything like that. It's just real time. When I'm finished with it, I can close down. And then if it doesn't show up where you were, don't have a heart palpitation, just simply refresh the browser, because sometimes it doesn't come up, and there will be the letter template, and it will show you that it was in there and it was updated a few seconds ago by me. But unlike the other documents that are shared, this one is private. If I want to navigate around my OneDrive, instead of pressing back in the web browser, if I want to get back to the top level, I can click my files. If I want to get back to the level above with my administration documents, I can click the link and it will navigate me backwards and forwards. So you like that, and then back. and you can quickly and easily move around in the web browser. It's just a slightly different way of thinking of it. Before I show you about what to do with files, I'm just going to bring you back over here because we've been living so far in the My Files section where I've got all of the files in the folders that I'm using. But if I'm looking for a document I've edited recently, I can click on the Recent tab, and there's the letter template that I used, and there's the action plan that I uploaded. And I can see the dates I last used them, but they're easy for me to get back to materials that I've been using. Maybe I'm halfway through writing a set of reports, I can jump back in. Or if somebody shared something with me, I can click on the shared folder, and then I will see someone shared a picture with me and someone shared some OneNotes with me. That's where I can pick up that. If you are editing a link that's been sent to you, that someone has shared with you, please be aware that you'll be editing the original copy they shared. If it's, for instance, somebody has shared their planning, maybe you are team teaching or you're a job share and you're working in year 2 together. If you go making amendments, it will overwrite their original copy. So if you want to avoid that, you simply need to take a copy of the file that's in here, move it into your My Files, and then edit it from there instead of editing the original. If you want to collaborate and you want to capture your changes together, then it's absolutely right to open it up from the shared list. If you've deleted anything, you can go to the recycle bin, and then there will be all of the files there that you've deleted, and you can either empty it and get rid of them, or if you click one, you'll get the option to restore it and put it back into the folder. By default, Office 365 has 30 days on the recycle bin, and if you don't empty it after 30 days, it will empty itself. You can change that policy, so you can get your IT admins to go in and extend that to 60 or 90 days. It just depends how long you think you're going to need to keep files in the recycle bin. If I pop back over to My Files again, if I go back into administration and then Office, where my letter template was, I've got various options now that I can use that I didn't have if I was using a traditional setup of my file being on my computer or being on my server. And that's along the top here in what's called the ribbon. The ribbon itself will change depending on what you do. So you've got the new and the upload options that we've already looked at. But what you can do is you can share or copy a link. If I want to do something with a specific document, I need to tick it on the side or tick multiple ones, and you can see the ribbon along the top changes. I can rename, I can delete, I could print it without opening. The same options are available. If you click the 3 dots in the middle, you'll get a menu that pops out here, and what's across the banner at the top will also be there. So it's 2 routes to the same thing. If I want to share my file, I'll click on it and I'll press the share button. Now, this is a way where I can invite somebody into my world, my private space of OneDrive, and I can get them to collaborate on a document with me. By default, it always gives you the option of anybody with this link. So if somebody gets the link I'm about to send, it means that they could get in my OneDrive. That's not very secure and something you want to try and avoid. So if you click that button, I'll just do that again for you. It's into share and then click the link at the top. It's anyone can edit. You can have people within your, so instead of Contoso, it will say your school, or you can have people that have got existing access, or you can say specific people. I'd urge you to choose specific people. But if you want to leave it as anyone with this link, you can decide whether people can edit, review and add comments, or just view. You can also set a date that this link expires. So I could say I want it to expire on Friday. You can additionally set a password. So if someone did intercept this link, they couldn't get in. And you've got even more control that if you flick this button across, people can only look at it online. They can't download a copy. So you've got a lot of control over your file rather than attaching it to an email and sending it. But I'm going to show you as well the specific example. So specific people. And I'm going to drop that down. I do want them to be able to edit because I want them to collaborate with me. And I'm going to press apply. And all of that bundles back up. It ravels together. And that's all contained in the options at the top. You can go back in any time if you change your mind and you can modify things. So then you need to find somebody in your organization you want to share with. Well, I'm going to share with Daryl. So just like you're sending an email, you can have one person, you can have multiple people, and then you can send a message. So it might be, hello, Daryl. Please add your ideas into the template. And then you can have as much or as little as you like. There is a character limit of 536 characters. And I'm up at thanks on there, Martin. So very much like an email, scroll up and down. And now, instead of having to attach this to an email, I simply press the send button. It's marked here in blue. And when I send it, it will move from private, and that will update to shared. You might need to refresh your browser. Sometimes it does take that. And now it tells me that is shared. And there's somebody else that can access that. If I want to see who's got the share link, what you can do is click on shared, and you can drop down and you can say, well, look, Daryl has access. If I change my mind and I want to revoke that access, what I can do is press the cross. And when I press the cross, that removes the access and it comes back to just me. And if I refresh the browser in a minute, that will pick up that that's going back to being just me as a private document. Sometimes it does take a few seconds. And then they no longer have access. But because I've just knocked out their access, that access is dead immediately, even though they've got an email in their inbox with the share link. If you don't want to use a share link and you want to copy a link, you can highlight again, go to copy link. You can decide who it is. So it might be people within inside my school. And I want to say that they can only view this. And I also want to block them downloading it. So I'm going to apply that. I get the link. I copy the link, and then from one of our previous sessions, I could go to Teams and I might go to the staff team and I might in here send a message saying staff letter template. Please add your ideas to the document here. Yeah, if you haven't used Teams before, it's something we've covered in previous training sessions, but it's also something we will cover again in future training sessions. So if you want to come back and know more about Teams, it is a big training item on its own. So don't worry too much if you're not familiar with it. But what you can do is you can post to each other in Teams, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to send that, and then all of a sudden, the link is it's showing it's going into my personal drive, but only to that one document. It doesn't give access to any other files in that folder. And then I can get everybody coming in there and viewing it. If I wanted them to edit, I'd need to change the permissions. I'm going to drop back over, and in here, there's my letter template. So I could download it, but you really don't need to download a copy because you can work quite happily from the cloud. You can print without opening or print from when you've got it open. You can delete it and it will end up on my recycle bin. You can rename it either inside the document or from the top. And there are the 3 dots up here, which hides other options where you can move to. You can do the drag and drop that I did earlier, or you can take a copy and leave the original. If you want to, you can also see the version history. This is really powerful. So once I've got it ticked, if I click version history, I can see I've got 2 versions. I've got a version 1 and a version 2. If somebody comes in and they edit it and they mess up my default work, what I can do is click the 3 dots, I can restore, and I can leave that version that's where it is now intact, and I can restore and get the previous original version back to my OneDrive if I want to by pressing the restore button, or I could delete those previous versions, or I can just open it up and start editing from there on. So unlike traditional working with documents as it would have been on your computer on the server, you're no longer stuck with the changes people have made. You can roll it back and get back to your original version that you wanted to use, and it's not the end of the world, or you let everybody else move forward with the version that you've given them. So that's sharing and links. Has anybody got any questions over sharing in links, or anyone used it? I'm also going to go and check the chat and just see if anybody there has come in. Yeah, I can see Lois seems to have left. You can absolutely do that. That's no problem at all. I'll catch up with Lois afterwards. No other questions in there at the moment. Anybody been using this at all? You can use the reactions at the top and put your thumbs up if you want. That's the little smiley face person with a big hand at the very top next to the chat. If you have been using it, you can give me a thumbs up. Yep, I can see Rachel has. Fantastic, Rachel. It's one of those things where it might seem a little bit abstract at the first going to the cloud, but the more you use it, the easier it gets and the more familiar it is. The version that we're looking at currently is solely the version out of the cloud. You can view it and use it from your computer as well. So what you can do is, if I swap the windows that I'm sharing with you now and I just share the entire desktop of my computer, let's just do that. So you can, if you want, in your Windows Explorer window, you've got OneDrive here. Mine's signed out at the moment because I've been doing some other training session. But if you're signed into your OneDrive, you'll then be able to see, if I went into my documents, as if this was my OneDrive, you're able to see all your folders and they will mirror what's up there in the cloud, but you can use your documents as if you are here on your own computer. So you don't always have to open up the cloud. That's what's called syncing your OneDrive. And you do that by pressing the little button down in the taskbar next to where the date is. There's a grey cloud and you sign in with your Office 365 account, and then it will appear here on your Windows Explorer window. So you've got two routes in, and it doesn't matter if you make changes in the cloud, it will push it back to your computer. If you make changes on your computer, it will push it back to the cloud once you get an internet connection. If you are working offline, it will then sync when you get back online, so it won't stop you working offline. You've got two options with having the files on your computer. You can have it so you've got links to the cloud and all you see are the file symbols and names, but actually there's no data stored on your computer, and that's quite useful if you've got limited storage space on your computer. Or you can have it so it actually syncs the physical document to your computer. So if you lost internet for hours, it doesn't stop you working. You can still get on and you can work just like you always would. And when you get back to somewhere with wireless or you get a hardwired connection again, it will sync up and it will sort out which document is the most recent. One of the other things you can do is you can sort on the side, so you can have things sorting by type of file, name of file, the date was modified, sizes ascending and descending. You've also got different lists, so I'm on a standard list. You can have a compact list. If you're more of a visual person, you can have it as tiles and it will give you a little preview in the window as to what's there. That can suit the way you're working. If you want to see information about a file, so it might be the document that I've got there, you can tick it and then press the little eye up in the top corner. You get a little preview. You'll find out who's been accessing any activity. This file hasn't been well used. But if you do want to know a bit more about any file or folder, the information button in the top right hand corner is a good place to go. You've also got access in the bottom left hand corner to any shared areas that you're a member of, or what you can do is click the app launcher in the top left hand corner and you can open up SharePoint, or you can open up Teams, as I just jumped into a few minutes ago. So OneDrive is entirely private and it will stay private unless you use those share links by ticking the document, or you copy a link and you share it in another way. And it will allow you to quite happily continue working. The storage limit is 1 terabyte per person. To give you some context of whether that's a lot of space or not, I've got teachers in secondary schools that are using very big media files for raw photos or video editing and music, and they don't fill their 1 terabyte. So on a day-to-day basis, if you're keeping your work in there, you're going to really struggle to fill it up. And I think I could count on less than one hand the amount of times somebody has said they filled out their OneDrive. And very often, if you have, you can go back in and have a look. If you finished with some old projects, or do you not need all those files, and you can have a bit of a tidy up, prune some bits out, and then you'll still free up some space. You could also move things over to shared areas. So this is an example of a SharePoint, and a SharePoint can be many things. It can be like an intranet. But if you had your subjects, so it might be that we're going to go over to science. And if I pick my science page, in my science page when I land, this is very similar to OneDrive. There's my new documents button. There's my upload button. If I wanted to share something and tick it, I've got my share button. I've got my copy button, my downloads, and my deletes. They are pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that this SharePoint is going to be shared to everyone. And like the link that I showed you on my Windows computer for OneDrive, you can have your SharePoint syncing to there as well. So you can either use this version in the cloud by going to the app launcher and then choosing your SharePoint that you have access to, or you may have a limited amount of SharePoints you have access to. And it might be that we're looking for the planning for science, and there's absolutely nothing in this planning folder, so I need my science department to get their act together. But it's also could be a scenario where we're on a journey and we're moving from having a server with server shares. And what we're going to do is we're going to rationalize all that data we had on the server. There's probably an awful lot of rubbish that we don't want to move up, and we can move the clean current versions of our planning for our science teaching up here into the online space, and then everyone in the science subject or in the secondary department, as it is with this example here, can get to those resources and they can use them and edit them together. But I could keep my personal version of my planning for teaching over here, and I could create a folder and I could call that folder science. And then what I could do is I could get my file that I've taken from the SharePoint and I can adapt it for the class that I'm teaching. It leaves the original planning, which will eventually be in there, intact with all the links to resources or guidance on how you might approach it. But then I can tailor it to suit my individual class over in my OneDrive. So those two things, they blend together, but they've got very specific and different uses. Instead of having a SharePoint, you can also have a team. So if I go back one step, I've got lots of different teams in here because I use this for training. But if I was a teacher, I might have a class team, which is a class team is somewhere where pupils and also staff can work together. And as well as communicating, I have a files section in my team, and every single team will have a file section. And then in here, this is a primary example this time. I've got my English, maths and science resources. I've got things like my class topics. I've got some maths progress grids, so the pupils I'm working with can be independent in evaluating how much progress they've made. I've also got class materials. If I put things in class materials, they're read only if I'm using the file sections in Teams. So it's a way of me controlling and stopping people's deleting. If it goes outside, then it's editable. So please, again, don't put your only version, keep your only in your original version in your OneDrive and then drop other versions in here. So that's another place where you can keep your resources. In reality, this files tab here is just in the background another SharePoint like this. It's just presented in a different way inside of a team and makes it look a bit more user friendly. But if I wanted to, I could go and I can view it in, if I wanted to, I can click on the side. I could open it in SharePoint if I wish to. I won't go in there today. But what you can do is then move all of your class resources if it's a class team in here. So these could be subject resources. They could be class resources that you use for teaching. It could be educational, it could be pastoral, whatever it is. But then that's there, and that enables the pupils to get to them. Whereas very often the SharePoints are used for just between staff or trusts and staff. And then your class teams give you that extra layer, a bit like what used to be the whole school shared area or the people shared area, except it's for your specific classroom. But you can move resources if you want between classes. If I decided my English planning, something I wanted to send to somewhere else, I could copy it to, and then up comes the window, and I might have other teams that I'm working with that are class teams. So I might want to move it to my staff demo team, and then I could press copy it here, and it would copy it from my file section in my team over. So if you are working within a school, you obviously want to share resources really easily, or people feel able to borrow those resources. We don't want to be increasing workloads. We want to decrease workloads. We want to use the technology to help us work more smartly and easily. Well, then that's an option that you can use in there. I'm just going to cancel out that because I don't actually want to move that one over. So from today's training, it's really throw it open to you now. If you want to ask me any questions, if you want to have a go at doing that yourself, if you want to explain how you've used it and maybe you've come up against a barrier or how you found success, you can feel free to do that. If there isn't a need or nobody wants to do that as time now, I will jump back over to the presentation, but I'm offering that as a chance for you to use this time we've got this afternoon for me to be here with you while you have a go at that. I'll just check the chat and see if anyone's popped anything in the chat at the same time. Nothing in the chat at the moment. No, okay. If there isn't anybody that wants to do that in a live real time, I will stop sharing and I will move back over to the presentation. So as I've said, the resources that we're using today, They're all available in Microsoft Learn, and link for Learn is in the beginning of the chat from today's session. And once you click on that, you'll need to sign in with your Office 365 account. But there's 3 courses that I'd recommend in there. There's some Transforming Learning with Teams, which links to the files section in Teams. There's also some resources for OneNote as well, and I'll post those after this session in the chat. The chat will stay open for you. We've got a series of webinars that will look at different aspects. So today is very much around OneDrive and Teams and file organization and collaboration, but we'll go through, we'll have a look at Teams for community and collaboration. So if you're not sure with Teams, you can join me for that next time. We'll also have a look at forms. We'll look at accessibility tools to make resources more accessible to staff, parents and adults. We'll also look at using apps such as Sway for presentations across the whole school. And then at the end of this series in April, we'll have a look at Minecraft Education Edition. And you don't have to attend the whole series. You can pick the ones that are of interest to you, or you can come along to each one if you wish. It's really up to you. You can build your own pathway if you like. So it's a congratulations in a way that you have completed a chunk of the learning that's available on Microsoft Learn. So the code that's flashing on screen there for you now, once you're signed in, you can redeem it in Learn. Where you go is log in. Once you're logged in, it will change, and you can see my version with my name in the bottom left-hand screenshot that I've got. If you go to where I've drawn the yellow circle, which says redeem your code now, you'll get a pop-up box as it shows in the right-hand screenshot. That pop-up box is where you can then redeem the code at the top, the N6PY6M. If you are watching this as a recording after the event, we will make sure that that code stays live so you can redeem that moving forwards. That's not a problem. But if you also want to copy and paste that rather than write that down, I will pop it in the chat for you today so you can pick that up from there too. I can see a question in the chat, so I'll pick that one up as well now. So would you recommend schools moving away from shared drives to go to SharePoint? I would, because ultimately traditional servers will stop being a thing and everyone will move to keeping their documents in the cloud. Using Office 365 was the first step, and then having that as a platform that you can log into, and then slowly over time there won't be a physical server in your school or college. You will simply just keep your documents there, and it's for all those reasons that we discussed at the beginning: be able to get to documents from anywhere, collaboration ease, not having to keep separate versions, and so forth. So it does require a lot of planning, and it should be part of a sustained transition project. It shouldn't just be something that people run off and try and do on their own. It should be coordinated at either trust level or school or academy level. And you think about, well, I've got all this content at the moment on the server, either in shared areas or people's individual private areas. And just what are we going to do? Realistically, the best place to start is people getting their personal files into their OneDrive and getting familiar with the way that OneDrive works. And just like I said with the shared materials, you might need to have a tidy up before you move your materials across. If you do move your work over and you are somebody who likes files, you need to remember whichever cloud service you go to, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Amazon, they all have a character limit. So by that, I mean the individual letters. You can only have 256 characters. So if I had a folder and it was called subject resources, and then inside of subject resources, I had further folders, which were all called maths, English, and science, each one of those letters that make up the names of the folders count towards the 256 character limit. If I then put a file inside of one of those folders, maths or English, and that file's got a really long name, you're going to start to get towards your limit. So you might need to have a shallower folder structure. And that's one of the tasks that we work with our schools on, is that just rationalize and bring it back a little bit and not have it so deep. The recommendation is between 5 to 10 folders deep, depending on the length of the names of your folders and the length of the names of the documents inside. Then move it all over to OneDrive. It's not the end of the world. We always say keep the original version for a number of months anyway. But if you've got a folder name or folders that are too big and go too deep in their structure with long names inside of them, you'll end up with them being orphaned, and all of a sudden, when you get so many folders deep, there'll be nothing inside. So you just need to make sure that you manage that process. Any other questions at all? Anything else you'd like to know? When managing the folder permissions, do you have any recommendations? Yes. So with your OneDrive, it's not a problem. Your security that you have set up on your Office 365 account means that the default you start with is nobody else can get in. But if you're looking at a SharePoint, then you will need to have what's called security groups, and you have one maybe for students and pupils, another one for staff, and that stops, for instance, pupils being able to see a staff SharePoint. You can also then, within a SharePoint, decide things like document libraries, which is what I showed you with the science planning documents, who is a member, who isn't a member, so that you won't get people, even as staff, straying into SharePoint areas that they shouldn't see because there might be sensitive data in there. With teams, you need to plan how your teams are going to be structured. So you could have a staff shared team, but then within that, you might have areas in that staff shared team that are only for the business manager or only for the leadership team. And you decide who are going to be owners that control that and administrate it, and who are going to be members. And if you're not a member, you wouldn't see it. And the same would go for classroom. You wouldn't have every pupil a member of an individual classroom. It would just be the 30 or 32 pupils that you're teaching within the class, and you'd have a class team for each physical team in your school. Any other questions that you'd like to ask me at all? I'm really happy to answer them and help you. And that's what this training session is for, so you can start to think about the best way to approach this. Okay, see another question there. What about a member of staff changes role, for example, SLT and from a normal teacher? Yeah, so you've got two options. You can either manage your SharePoint manually or your Teams manually, and then somebody has the unenviable job of when somebody might leave the school, or somebody might go on maternity leave and you get a cover teacher in, or as you say, somebody changes role and they don't actually leave the school, but they move from classroom teacher to being an assistant head. Then you need to go in and change their status or remove them from one team and add them to another team, or add them into another SharePoint group. The easiest way to avoid that headache in the modern way of working is to have what's called a sync tool. Turn It On has a sync tool called Active Cloud Management. There are lots of other sync tools out there. What they do is they link up with your MIS system, and they'll look at the information in your MIS database, whether you're RMM Integris, whether you're SIMS, whether you're Bromcom, Arbor, whatever you are. It will look at the individuals you've got in there, the pupils and the staff. It will look at the registration groups and the subjects that they have attached to them. And then as your MIS database updates, somebody leaves or a pupil goes halfway through the term, that sync tool keeps all of your SharePoints and your teams in sync, and it will remove people and stop their access to certain areas or SharePoints and add them into other ones. And that stops you having to do all that manual management. So if you are going to go into this in a large way, it's a recommendation that you use a sync tool. Microsoft has its own tool called School Data Sync, but it just takes away a lot of the time that you could potentially waste there with trying to make sure that all the correct people are added appropriately, and it will stop them seeing things that they shouldn't see. Great question so far. Are there any more in there that anybody wants to ask? No? Okay. If there isn't, I will double check back in a minute. Follow us on social media. We do post frequently on LinkedIn and also Twitter. So our hashtag is Turn It On Support or Turn It On. Also, people at Microsoft to follow. Mike Tholson is very prolific with his posting and has great tips on how to get the best out of Office 365. We would also love to get your feedback. So there's a QR code on screen there. You can scan that with your device, or you can go to the evaluation form using the link that I'm just going to pop into the chat. It's only 7 questions. We'd really like to get some feedback about how you found this session and what else you'd like to see as well. If there's any other sessions you'd like us to run in particular, we are always listening and we like to provide what schools are looking for. If you are thinking that Turn It On is somebody you work with and you're not already with us and you'd like to know more, we can offer pretty much support for anything. We are solely focused on education IT, and our mantra is to bring technology to life and to make it easier for people to access and use. So if you'd like to know any more, you can contact us if you're not working with Turn It On at office@turniton.co.uk. Or if you already work with Turn It On and you've got a consultant that visits you, or you know your manager or your school development manager, please do talk to them and they'll be more than happy to help you. So I haven't got anything else that I'm going to add this afternoon. I am going to stop the recording, but all that leaves me to say is a